So let's go ahead and get started. You all right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, you might want to get your notebook out and start getting this guy on notebook. I don't know why I say that anymore, because I'd say maybe about 35% of my students actually use notebooks now. Most are using tablets or phones, things like that. Not shocking within the next 10 years, I basically have no one using a device, or rather, no one using an actual notebook. Everyone's using devices. Anyways, so let's start with identifying Pacifica. It essentially includes all the various islands of the Pacific and Antarctica, which is a pretty big area of stuff. Though I do want to point out something, Antarctica isn't as big as it looks on this map. Something we didn't really talk about, and I'm not sure if you did in your class with Sister Susan, but it's map projection. You guys understand what that means?
Yeah.
What is map projection?
Probably what.
All right, let's start with basics. What is a map?
It's a diagram of the location.
All right. Let's refine it even more. What's a world map?
It shows you where all the kinds of maps are.
It's a two-dimensional representation of the Earth. Simple, easy, right? It's two dimensions. It's flat, right? And what's the problem with that?
You can't really see you can't really see what's wrong.
Let's analyze it different. What's a globe?
It's not going to be, it's circular itself.
It's a sphere. So you try to flatten it, doesn't work, does it?
It's not
In order to make it flat, you're going to have to lose accuracy. That's why, for instance, if you look at different types of maps, Greenland changes shape. Some maps, Greenland's bigger than the United States. Not this particular map. This is a Robinson map, but if you said square ones, oh my goodness, things can get very quickly distorted. That is map projection. How you put it onto a flat surface. Now, Antarctica is another one. It's actually not that big. The other thing that's kind of interesting about Antarctica is, let's strip away the ice for a second. I know you're tired, but you got to get your head off the desk. You got to wake up. You got to stand up, go get you some water, do what you got to do, but you got to wake up. That's actually why I recommend in college, especially, where your sleep schedule is going to be even more screwed up, get mints, put them in your pocket, chew them constantly if you have to, especially the strong ones. They can wake you up. Plus coffee. Yeah, so let's strip away the ice. This is what Antarctica looks like. It's actually more of an archipelago, which brings us over here to the list of words that I have written down for you. An archipelago is a chain of islands. It's a group of islands. A great example of that, if you're having trouble remembering what that is either Japan or Hawaii. You notice how it's a bunch of different islands grouped together. And in truth, there's different kinds of islands. There's volcanic islands, continental islands, and atolls. And the basic difference is how they all form. How do islands form, as a general rule of thumb?
volcanic.
Sure, volcanic activity. Now, is there an exception to that? Is there another way an island could form other than volcanic activity?
Yeah.
Let's think Australia. How did that form? Allegedly. What's the theory?
The Earth. Well,
I know what you're trying to say.
Earthquake type thing,
Look,
or
it's first-
continental drift.
There you go. Continental drift. Sure. So that basically the idea that all the continents were one giant continent, which, by the way, what was it called?
Pangea.
Yeah, do you guys know the word comes from Pangea?
Panda. Oh, no, Pangea because the Pangea used to be shapes of the.
What's the word Pangea mean? So,
the shapes of the. Which one? What's the word where the shapes?
let's talk Latin for a second. Do you guys know what the word pan means in Latin?
Magical.
It means all.
Really?
For instance, Pan-African studies in college studies of all aspects of African culture. Gaia, where the word comes from. Again, Gaia means Earth, one Earth, all Earth.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, sure.
Two things. What is the word that when the countries were all, like, they weren't, like, in their shape yet?
Yes, Pangea. Pangea.
That's what, so I was right.
Yes, but you were answering a question I wasn't asking.
Oh.
Is I'm getting to. Second question. Yes. So, back to it. I don't know if they're really broken apart. Australia is an example of what you call continental islands. And the thing is people don't realize that Australia is an island. It's the biggest island on Earth, in fact. Now, other ways they can form is, say, it's volcanic activity. You have a volcanic island where basically magma comes up, forms an island. You did this in 8th grade, so you might have done the experiment. It forms an island. What happens if the volcano, though, sinks and there's just a coral reef left? That's an atoll. Now, did we watch the video on American Empire?
Nope.
Okay.
No.
Essentially, it's a CP grade video. The same guy who did the video on robots we watched, he did one on all the various islands controlled by the United States. Because at one point, we actually started collecting islands. And it seems like a very weird thing to do. Like, why does the United States need a bunch of islands in the Pacific Ocean? Why would they decide this? Well, if you put yourself in the mindset of the 19th century, the main method of transportation was ship, right? The way you're going to get from place to place is going to be on a boat. Now, traditionally, that's been operated with sails, but if you're using a sailing vessel, you're really kind of limited to where you can go. For instance, you can't sail directly against the wind. It'll just push your boat basically into deadlock. You can't go anywhere. You can even be pushed backwards, so it's not something you can really do. In addition, there are areas in the ocean called doldrums where there's no wind at all. So if you get there, you can die before the wind shows up again. So it's very, very tricky to operate a sailing vessel and get one place to another. And it's also kind of slow. In addition, you are still restricted to how far you can go because you have to feed and resupply your crew with water and all this other stuff. That's actually why people went to the Galapagos. But as technology progressed, as people developed steamships, they were able to basically ignore that. You know, you don't care where the wind's going. If you have steam, just keep chugging along wherever you want to go. You can cut off miles of your trip. So the problem with steam, you have to have coal and you have to have water. So essentially, these big empires, like the United States, needed islands to work as almost like gas stations. You'd stop with your steamship, buy coal, buy water, and move on. That's why we were collecting all these things. That's why we were doing that. Now, the problem is, a lot of these islands, there were people living on them, you know? Australia had the Aborigines peoples, New Zealand had the Maori, the Philippines had the Filipinos, all these different groups of people, and so, generally speaking, interaction with the West, you know, Europeans, Americans, isn't going to be the best thing. Some groups are going to be conquered and almost exterminated. The Aborigines, for instance, of Australia, face a lot of the same repercussions that we see with Native Americans and Native Africans. Other groups, like the Maori in New Zealand, were able to forge sort of alliances with the British because essentially they were so freaking warlike that the British were like, nah, not dealing with that. So essentially, these different places are going to be settled and different things are going to happen there. Now, as far as climate's concerned, there's a few things that are sort of different based upon where you are.
So this is in Antarctica you're talking about.
This is all the Pacific in general. For the most part, most of these places are going to be tropical. Of course, Antarctica is not. It's Arctic. But there's other phenomena that can occur. Of course, you guys know the monsoons that can happen. But also, you've got things like typhoons that are extremes of weather. You guys know what a hurricane is? Okay, typhoon is the same thing. It's literally the same thing. It's just it's a hurricane, but it's in the Pacific Ocean. not the Atlantic.
Mm,
That's really the only difference.
so typhoon is like just in the Pacific area?
Correct. Forms exactly the same way. And the thing is hurricanes tend to be less destructive than tornadoes. They're more or less a similar phenomenon. The only difference is that hurricane happens over water. And hurricanes are stronger than tornadoes. But here's the thing. Hurricanes and typhoons can be predicted. You can see how they're forming and tracked, and basically people know if they're going to get hit by one way before it happens, so they can prepare. Tornadoes are just like, bam, out of nowhere.
I don't see how it just does that so quickly, because it's a tornado, and the wind is so...
Sure. But you know, it's the wind that's not what causes a tornado to form.
It's hot and cold.
Or high and low pressure specifically. Essentially what happens is whenever you have a high pressure system and then a low pressure system, it causes essentially this incredible increase in wind power. Long story short, when these two things hit, that's when tornadoes can form. The other thing is, it's hard for us to predict them because it might happen, it might not. That's why, for instance, you have like storm chasers and things like that who are trying to study tornadoes, and they're like trying to find them, and you know they might be over here and one breaks over, so they will rush over here, and then another one breaks, they're just like chasing them back and forth. Literally, it's a very weird job. In fact, I believe there was an IMAX called Eye of the Storm or something to that effect, where a guy had basically built a tank. It was a car, it was a tank. And his goal was to run into a tornado with the tank and just stop, like being in the center of it, to study what it's like inside the middle of a tornado and film it. And I think I think he did it a couple different times.
How do you not die?
What would kill him?
So the way they lifted up off the ground.
So heavy it doesn't get picked up. Besides, it also had anchors that actually could like get into it.
I have a question. This is just about what is the whole what is the most worst thing typhoon, tornadoes, hurricanes? What's the worst out of all of it?
Probably tornadoes. To be perfectly honest. There's a lot of bad things that can be associated with all of those. And to say one's worse isn't to mean that another one is not bad. You know what I mean? Like, even the weakest natural disaster is still a disaster on a global scale. So, you know, that's an issue. But yeah, probably tornadoes. And the reason mainly is they're really hard to predict. And the thing is, by the time they hit, it's too late. They can also just do incredible amounts of devastation. The worst part about tornadoes isn't so much the risk of being picked up and flown, although that is a possibility. It's these things go hundreds of miles per hour in terms of wind. So they can pick up things like straw or blades of grass and fling them with such force they embed into wood. It's like a shotgun of just crap, you know, broken glass, bits of metal, or just stuff that picks rocks, you know, whatever. You know, it's like a hand grenade. It's just like or like a blender. I guess is a better word for it. You know, it's no good. So, anyways, but I was also going to show you this picture right quick here of an archipelago. Again, there's just a bunch of different things, island chains, get the idea.
Wait, I want to take a picture.
Sure.
So, can you choose one?
What?
Can you choose one? An archipelago is a group of islands, just, okay. Yep. And then what's the Antello or?
An atoll is basically where an island has sunk in a reef. I don't know, like a...
It's like a coral reef? Coral reef, yeah, thank you.
Coral reef remains. Yeah. So let me show you a picture of an atoll. AT double. For instance, Bikini Bottom Atoll is one of them. You guys are fans of SpongeBob.
I don't watch SpongeBob SquarePants.
Bikini Bottom is a real atoll in the
Oh, it
world.
is?
Yeah, and it was the site of nuclear testing. So the joke is that's what caused all the animals, like life, for instance, they're able to talk and things like that in the show because they got mutated by radiation. Of course, that's not how radiation works.
Yeah.
You know, mutation doesn't happen like that. In fact, you just say the word mutation, people tend to think like a bomb goes off and people start like hulking out, turn into zombies, or no, that's not how it happens. Yeah.
Can I ask something on topic?
Sure.
About the paper.
Shoot.
Is it due Thursday or Friday?
Well, we're gonna be here on Friday, yeah?
No, we're not. Good Friday.
We are off, or we had I wasn't sure about that.
Good Friday, we don't have it. It's in the planner.
Yeah, I just wanted to double check it, because I didn't remember which it was. Let's see. Good Friday, no classes, yeah, okay. So we have the prayer service on Thursday, so it'll be due first. Yeah, I meant to double check that. Thank you for reminding me.
And you did a lot of, like, all the number calculations in it, right? Or something like that.
No. Basically, what I want you to do is explain where your money was spent and why.
Well, I did that including all the numbers.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
That's solid. Yeah, I'm not really gonna be upset about more. I'm gonna be upset about less, so you're good.
Okay.
Alrighty, solid. So anyways, let's talk global warming for a second. What is global warming? Because there's people who will argue, debate, and talk about this stuff. What is it?
It's where the earth is warming up.
Yeah, that's pretty succinct. I think that's true. It's the average temperature of the Earth going up, sure. Okay, good point. Is this happening? Is this going on?
Yes.
Is it going on? This is not a trick question. Yes, it is, absolutely. It's irrefutably proved. Now, here's where people get questioning about it. Are human beings influencing it?
Yes.
And the answer is yes. People will deny it, they're wrong, but yes, it absolutely is happening. Now, let's analyze all this different stuff. Okay, first up, it is not what the weather is like. You guys know what weather is, what the definition of weather. It's the condition of the atmosphere at a given place and time, okay? So what the weather is, what it's like outside right now, that's weather, okay? Global warming and weather have somewhat, they're related, but one is not indicative of the other. For instance, you can't look outside and say, well, it's warm, that proves global warming. That's asinine. It doesn't make any sense, does it? I mean, there's 1,000 things that can influence weather. At least six major ones. And, you know, any one of those could be attributed to it, not necessarily global warming. We're looking at averages over hundreds of years, or as much time as we have. Is it going up? Yeah, okay. Are we influencing it? Yeah. Why? Greenhouse effect. Yeah.
Is it so global warming is weather?
No. Global warming is the average temperature of the Earth increasing. Of the Earth. Average temperature of the Earth increasing. Now, this has been happening for a very, very long time. I.e., you do know at one point our continent was pretty much a big chunk of ice, yes? During the Ice Age. It's gotten warmer since then, hasn't it? So global warming is irrefutably proved. Now, are humans influencing global warming? Again, yeah, we are. We have. We can see this effect largely due to the greenhouse effect. Now, what's the greenhouse effect? Okay. First off, let's talk about heat. Where does the heat for the Earth come from?
The sun.
Two places. The sun is huge. That's the main thing. A significant percentage, I can tell you what else. The only other source of heat is our core.
You mean the core of the Earth?
Yes. For instance, there's a hypothetical situation. Like, let's say the sun went and blew up. Okay, it was just gone. Would that mean all life on Earth ends? Not necessarily. For instance, if we get closer to the core, there's enough heat there to survive. Hypothetically, there's things called rogue planets that have no stars flying through space that could have life on them. It's like it's a neat thing. Anyways, back to it. So what happens when the sun's light and heat hits the Earth? Well, some of it is going to be absorbed, right? Some it's going to be absorbed by the ocean, some it's going to be absorbed by the continents, all kinds of stuff. Some of it, though, reflects back, yeah? It's going to reflect back out into space. Well, some of that is going to hit our atmosphere, our ozone, and bounce back sort of like a mirror. It's insulation, essentially. If you think about the Earth being a light bulb and the atmosphere, the ozone, being like a nice fluffy blanket around that, keeping all that heat energy in, not letting as much escape. The greenhouse effect is where we use gases, greenhouse gases, that will essentially act as more insulation. It means more energy is kept, and this increases the temperature. In addition, there's this idea of there's holes in the atmosphere, a giant hole over the Arctic, I forget where exactly, that's letting in more direct radiation. There's all kinds of science that's in terms of studies. And essentially the way that people tend to study this is looking at the levels of ice that are freezing in places like Antarctica, and there is less of it. Now, going from there, like what's going to happen if all the ice melts? It's water world. It's basically Mad Max and water. It's a terrible movie if you haven't seen it. But we don't know. No, not Mad Max. Water world. It's essentially Mad Max, but on water. It's basically a movie of the polar ice caps melt. Now people live on the ocean. And it's just as bad as it is. With Kevin Costner as the lead. It's awesomely bad.
Okay.
Yeah, here's the thing is that there are really three different kinds of movies out there. You've got the documentaries, which are all pretty much lies. You've got films, which are made to make you go, and think and have an experience. And then there's flicks, movies that are just, we don't care about a plot, violence, stuff like Conan the Barbarian and Clash of the Titans. And this stuff, it's like, we're not trying to like teach you anything. We just want to have like some muscle-bound guy flinging knives through dudes and all kinds of craziness. You laugh, but that totally happened in Predator. So, and then of course you got to have the one-line quip afterwards. So Arnold throws a knife through, he sticks him to a tree, he goes, "Stick around." That's a flick.
I thought you meant like,
Awesomely
with
bad.
romance. I thought you meant like romance. I didn't think you meant.
Oh yeah, romance. They're on the same. Don't trust me. They're on the same route. Think about the movie Titanic for a second, right? What's that movie about?
Ship that sinks.
Yeah, that's ostensibly what it's about.
Oh.
How much of the movie is actually the ship sinking?
Not an hour of it.
It's not very much. And to be perfectly honest, they're all focused on the relationship between Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. They're not interested in like anything historic. And this is my theory that when people make a movie about history, they're like, crap, we've got to throw a love story in this. If we don't have a love story, then the women's won't go. Because no woman could be interested in history, right? It's like, what? And it's really funny because, like, I swear to God, every movie I'm like, oh, this is about history. Oh, there's a love story. For instance, if you guys have seen Pearl Harbor, it's about the Japanese attack in World War II. It's got a love triangle in it. We can't just have one romance. We got to have three, or it's three-way romance. It doesn't make everybody in love with everybody else. Oh, but it's like, what does this have to do with Pearl Harbor? And then you've got anyway, it's just funny to me. Usually it's a disaster. Usually people are sad too. Yeah, whatever. that has nothing to do with global warming. But actually, it could. You know, there's that movie 2012.
I
That's,
want to know if that happened in the Titanic or not.
oh no, that was totally fictitious. Yeah, there's been some. John Williams. All those. In fact, to my knowledge, the only movie I can think of right off that has a historical basis, which might be true, is the movie Darrow's Baron, which is about the Red Baron. I think about Nussdorf, because there's a love story with him and his nurse, and it's like that might have happened because there are rumors that I read in one place. So I don't think they were going for that. I think they didn't care. I think they just wanted to, like, you know, oh, love story, and why not? You know. So, again, this is organized a little differently up to this point, because you notice this entire time when we've done location and place, we've been talking about a continent, north, south, east, and west. That's not really applicable here. The Pacific is pretty empty, all factors considering. And if you think about it, one, it's the biggest ocean on Earth, and two, there's not much there. There's islands, there's atolls, and all these things, but otherwise, it's pretty empty. So we can't really fall to the traditional means of looking at it over place. I mean, for God's sake, if you look at the chapter in your book on Pacifica, it's like 20 pages and done. Whereas the other ones are like 90. This is like nothing. So I'm actually going to be going off the book here in the next few sections as we look at the cultures of this area. We're going to look at kind of its history. Although some of it's going to be estimated. You know, it's going to be at best possible guess, because in some of these places it wasn't very well documented. And basically, when the Europeans took over a place, one of the first things they did is suppress the culture that was already there, and sort of tried to suppress it, supplant it with the culture of the Europeans that were taking this area over. So, for instance, the name the Philippines, right, comes from King Philip II of Spain. You know, even the name that they identify themselves with is European. You know, so it's a similar kind of thing I was in Latin America. You know, replacing all this culture, but also distinctly different, because some of these places did hang on to their traditional culture, and for that reason is still around. Now, of course, for the most part, this area is tropical. So, again, when it comes about nice places to visit, pretty high on that list. Of course, New Zealand has become like Lord of the Ring geek central, because all the movies, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, was filmed in New Zealand, and the sets, some of them are still there. For instance, Hobbiton, they kept the set there. And what's interesting is they didn't really keep it up very well after filming The Lord of the Rings, so it kind of deteriorated. But after The Hobbit needed to be rebuilt, they kept it around as essentially a tourist destination. And so, like, you can go there and hang out. They've got a restaurant there, they've got all this kind of stuff, and take pictures of the Hobbit houses and all this kind of stuff. Which is weird. If you're ever interested, this is kind of a neat little geography thing to do, and I think I've done it once or twice, and who knows, maybe we'll just go ahead and do it right now. We can go find sets from movies that have been abandoned around the world.
Let's do it right now.
Yeah, let's do that right now. I'll stop the recording, though, because it'll slow us down. But it's kind of a neat little thing you can do.